Franz Kafka. Chapter 6. Charles Baudelaire in France, 1821 to 1867, inaugurated the phrase in European literature which gravitates around man's loneliness and isolation, and has prepared us for the contemporary literature of extreme situations. The poet-thinker Baudelaire removed himself from his fellow man in the schizoid sensation of superiority and unworthiness. He accused himself less than life's darkness and confusion. The depressing experiences of the last 30 years have swept away the last remnants of the belief that man's destiny shares in the guided continuity of history, and it is more than a literary fashion that such half-forgotten poets and writers as Arthur Rimbaud, Leon Bloy, and Ernest Hello are now having their renaissance in France. All of them had expressed social alienation, and in their hostility to recognized middle-class standards, they attacked church and religion as part of society's intermilieu. The contemporary school of pseudo-existentialistic belles lettres extols this aloneness in life and dwells on its senseless character. We cannot help going on living. There is this inescapable fact of existing in suspense, and absurdly enough, we are quote-unquote free in our decisions. Sartre. But there is no longer an essence or existence that gives meaning to this freedom. Moral action becomes therefore anachronistic. Man is at long last beyond good and evil. He has lost all inward ties to his fellow man because he recognizes no deity. Ever-present fear is now his lot. He must choose without knowing which choice to make. The superhistorical heritage of Moses' Decalogue or the Sermon on the Mount are considered no longer applicable to the chaos of our age. W.H. Auden's verdict is to the point when he says, quote, existentialism has, as Baudelaire said of Stoicism, one sacrament for the sinner, suicide, close quote. Both Sartre and Camus are, however, aware that Baudelaire's detachment from society was nothing but another Trauhausen des clercs, and they want to take an active share in politics. They oppose Stalinism, capitalism, and Christianity without being able to make a choice or offer a new political creed. Leon Bloy and George Beramos impress us as fearless critics of the Catholic Church, of which nevertheless they remained loyal members. Their skill in portraying infernal characters, some of them Catholic priests, as we find them also in Graham Greene's work, and the apparent delight with which they reflect the ever-present power of moral and social evil cannot, however, make them spiritual relatives of Sartre and Camus. Theologically speaking, they are dramatizing their conviction that the devil's power has enormously increased in our time. But as in Job, the devil is still God's servant, not his adversary. Their faith in God leads them to a new search for his will in the jungles of modern city life, and their dark narratives have some of the force of Hubben's religious cartoons and Stephen Lochner's hell scenes, where we see sinful popes suffering with other condemned souls. Their new religious expression revives the apocalyptic fears of former centuries. George Beramos writes that evil in our time is only in its first beginning, a message echoed by Nicholas Berdiev's emphasis that the power that the future power of evil will be more terrible than that of earlier time. In contrast to these, C.S. Lewis' Screwtape Letters, with their concessions to modern man's desire for entertainment, make pleasant reading for the timid skeptics. It is as though the thin distribution of morality in Christian society is expected to find in such artistic renditions of novelists and painters a catalyst to produce the first crystallization of a new faith. The modern Christian writer with artistic leanings wants to wean man away from the aesthetic to the moral by giving his art a moral cast. Kafka has no such aims. He centered upon darkness. In a sense, he had the evil eye capable of the most luminous penetration into the darkness. He was a disturber, a Gunther Anders. To return to his theological interpreters, considers it his salvation that he was hopelessly skeptical towards his own work. We know how he suffered from his sympathies with human beings and animals. He, the Jew by background and longing, although not by convictions, brings it home to us that the so-called Jewish question is eminently a Christian problem.